Welcome to another exciting learning experience as part of the Global Clinical Engineering Alliance Technology Snapshots series. My name is Yadin David, and today it is my honor and joy to introduce Gerald Zion, an expert in the international metrology field of clinical engineering, biomedical technologists, and BMET technicians testing equipment. Jerry holds a BS degree in electrical technology from Purdue University and a master level in management in science and technology from the Oregon Health Science University. He also holds certification as BMET from AAMI organization. Jerry has a vast experience, including 10 years in progressive position at hospitals as a biomed, a supervisor, and a manager of departments. In addition, he has 35 years experience as a product and clinical specialist, product manager, global technical training manager, and in the area of medical devices, testing, and measurement industries. These include, for example, the electrical safety of equipment, patient monitoring testing, defibrillator testing, electrosurgery unit testing, infusion pump testing, ventilators, and other gas flow pressure instrument used in medical device testing. Jerry presently serves as an independent consulting biomedical engineer, and I know Jerry for many, many years, where we have met and discussed international clinical engineering challenges in different conferences. In addition of being a highly respected colleague, Jerry is a good friend whom I called on and invited to help educate the international village of clinical engineering practitioners. Jerry's topic today is an introduction to medical equipment quality assurance and international electrical safety standards. Jerry, the microphone is yours.
Well, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to participate in this webinar on snapshots, for the technology snapshots. And without further ado, let's get going. We will talk today about an introduction to MEQA, Medical Equipment Quality Assurance, and International Electrical Safety Standards. So a little bit about medical equipment quality assurance. We have goals that we want to achieve. We want to make sure that the medical equipment remains safe and effective for clinical use. That's a terminology that the US FDA likes very much. And actually, it has resonated quite well in my experience with other regulatory organizations around the world. Of those things that are included in our risk-based assessment of the medical device and our test procedure and frequency of inspection, and evaluating our program effectiveness. So here's some goals. We want to ensure the inclusion and the proper onboarding of any medical device that we will hold in the inventory of our hospital biomed department or our client site if we're field service or traveling. We want to ensure proper functionality to the standards and to the manufacturer's equipment specification. We want to ensure clinical staff know how to properly operate the medical equipment. Bear in mind that clinical staff sometimes are brought on as temporary additions or may come from some other hospital or location that is using a different brand and model of a category of medical device, and therefore may not be properly familiar with the one or the brands and models that are in our inventory on our location. So it's important to make sure you're working closely with the nurse trainers, with the clinical staff, even the doctors and surgeons, to make sure that they are properly oriented to the medical device brand and model specific. We want to determine the proper frequency of inspection and make sure that we have that schedule set up for the particular medical device in question. And the documentation of results happen, and we're able to track the failures for long-term trends. We want to troubleshoot failures to root cause and correct the problem through repair or adjustment or whatever. And then we want to make sure we document those actions. And by the way, if we bring a manufacturer's field service engineer or an independent service provider person in to do those repairs, then we need their test report in order for us to have the proper information to document that what the root cause of the problem was, and that the repair actually was effected. And by the way, then we want to repeat the testing after the repair to make sure that that medical equipment is back to specification. We want to ensure the medical equipment is available for use. So if it's sitting broken, waiting for parts, and it's the only one in that category of medical equipment for the hospital, then the hospital cannot do their job. They cannot provide the care that they intended to provide. So it's really important that we make sure that all of the medical equipment is available for use and safe and effective. We would like to minimize the cost of repair. So there is another terminology that is used, maybe not so much internationally, but is used here in the US. It is a strategy called run till fail. In other words, we get the medical device in, we may or may not do any testing on it when it comes in our door. We just put it into clinical use, and we assume that it's actually performing to its design specification and the international standards, but it may not be. And then we run it until it breaks, until something happens. Well, if that failure happens during clinical use and we have not minimized the risk of that happening, then we really haven't done our job. The cost of repair is lower when we find problems early, and we can often do a repair because the components or subassemblies or even the patient connections are much less expensive when we can find them early than if we let it fail and make the repair problem worse. Above all, we want to reduce the risk of injury to patients, to operators of the medical equipment, and to ourselves, especially to those patients who are connected to the medical equipment. So some of the things that we're going to talk about, and these are 3 of the 5 categories that we will consider when we do a risk-based assessment to determine how often to test the medical equipment. We want to, the device function or its intended use is very important. We need to know what function does the equipment perform in the clinical environment. The highest risks are ones about life support devices or critical devices, lower risks for non-invasive and diagnostic devices, and even exam lights and exam tables. We want to minimize the risk of misuse or failure, and this is part of why we cannot just sit in the biomed department and wait till something is brought to us broken. We need to be out among the clinical staff. They need to know who we are. They need to trust us, because we need to minimize this risk of misuse or failure to be able to use properly that medical device. What are the possible consequences to the patient of a device malfunction or misapplication, human error or the like? The range is from death to no significant risk. And then mission criticality, which I mentioned just a minute ago. What is the impact on overall hospital patient care or patient flow if this particular medical device is not available and it's the only one we had? So those are some of the things to consider. The risk-based assessment actually comes from a textbook published by written by the University of Vermont, Toby Clark and others. And it is published by Fluke Biomedical under contract between the university and Fluke Biomedical. And the title of it is Medical Equipment Quality Assurance, Inspection Program Development, and Test Procedures. So you can obtain this from Fluke Biomedical if you ask. So one critical decision is, what will we include in the medical equipment inventory that we are going to manage? My opinion is, if it's an electromedical device or if it's a mechanical medical device that poses risk to the patient of any level, then we need to include it in the inventory and manage the inspections, the repairs, and all of that to the medical device. Even if, for example, an infusion pump or a whole bunch of infusion pumps are actually provided to the hospital under a contract to the supplier of the infusion sets and the fluid bags. Even those we need to include in our inventory and then put in policy statements. What is it that we will do and cover, and when will we rely on the provider of those infusion devices, as an example, for what they are responsible to do? This manages legal risk, and it also manages our understanding of what it is that we and in our department need to handle. So 3 simple questions. Is this medical device powered by electrical current? Yes or no? Does the powered device provide diagnostic monitoring information used in treatment? Yes or no? And does the powered device come in contact with the patient? Yes or no? And I would say not just powered, but as I said, those things that are mechanical as well, not powered automatically, but are mechanical devices. All right. This is the worksheet from the textbook that I talked about, used by the University of Vermont Biomed Department. And they create this, they fill in this worksheet at when they do an incoming or inspection or acceptance test of a medical device that is not yet in the inventory or has been sent away for repair and comes back. The important things here are to help us decide how often we should do testing, what are the risks involved, and even if the manufacturer also has recommended an inspection frequency. We want to double check it based on how this medical device is maintained, how it's used, and sometimes abused by the clinical staff in our location. At our location. They may be 2 different things, and you may need a more frequent inspection interval than the medical device manufacturer is typically using or recommending. So there are 5 criteria. That is the light blue or kind of gray looking rows in this worksheet. You select one option from those provided for each of the criteria, that is each criteria in the rows. And then you will transfer the weighting of that selection to the score column. Sum the data in the score column to get a total risk score. And the way we use this total risk score is if the total risk score is greater than 13, then we will apply a 2 times per year inspection interval. If the total risk score is between 9 and 12, that's a low enough risk that we would just look and inspect and test that medical device 1 time each year. If it is less than 9, we will for sure perform the acceptance or incoming inspection and post-repair, but these are low enough risks that they are actually okay to run until fail, and we will not add these to periodic inspection or preventive maintenance schedule. We will just run them till they fail, and then we will do the repair at that point because they're low risk. These are the exam lights and exam tables as an example. There's an exception here we want to talk about. Certain devices, such as life support equipment, have or may have more frequent inspections or a different way of scheduling those inspections. Let me give you an example. A ventilator. A ventilator is typically, may be inspected on an interval twice a year or so, or it may be inspected based on use hours. And in that case, there will be a use hour indication somewhere on the medical device, either in the user interface, the graphic user interface display, or else it may be an actual hour meter, more electromechanical, and you may find that on the back of them. Way back, the Bourne's Bear ventilators had a use hour meter on the back side of the ventilator, and that's how you would determine the use hours. Well, what that meant in that case was you had to know what the use hour meter reading was on the prior inspection. And so you're going to have to manage that. But it was based on use hours about every 2,000 hours. And then every 10,000 hours, there was a different interval because you needed to tear down and do much more invasive testing and part replacement on the compressor. So that's just an example. All right, so in summary about medical equipment QA, we want to be sure we're managing in incoming inspections, doing the acceptance testing, both when the medical equipment is new and when the medical equipment has gone away from the hospital for repair by someone else and been received back. We need to do another test and inspection. We wanted to document everything, make sure we have that documentation either appended as PDF files or something in our inventory management system. We want to ensure there's safety for electrical, mechanical, infection control, and that includes cleaning the equipment. And we want to make sure that we're following the principles and standards for electrical safety that come to us from the international standards. Now I want to shift gears a little bit to medical equipment minimum performance and safety standards. And I will be talking about the international standards, the IEC, the International Electrotechnical Commission, and those standards. So let's talk about the IEC standards. For medical equipment, these fall under the umbrella of IEC 60601. It is the overarching umbrella under which all the medical device category standards are found and the 2 electrical safety standards. They are all underneath this umbrella. So one of the things that I often have to catch people about is when they want to talk about electrical safety, they don't want to say the entire electrical safety standard name. And so they just say or publish in the service manual test procedure, IEC 60601. Well, but that only refers to the umbrella. It doesn't tell us which standard under 60601. What we mean to say in that case is IEC 60601-1 and which edition. It's important for us to know that, or IEC 62353 and which edition. Those are important for us to know. If we're talking about electrical safety, be specific, please. All right, so 60601 is the umbrella. These state the minimum performance and safety requirements, testing methods, and testing limits that have been determined by the committees that sit on the IEC, in the IEC subcommittees. These are tried and true. They're proven. They've been being used internationally for many, many years. But their categories, the categories are almost every medical device that I have found when I look into them. So the listing here is not an exhaustive or complete listing, but it includes the 2 electrical safety standards that I just mentioned, and the patient monitors. In patient monitors, there is a separate standard for each vital sign parameter. And so be prepared for that. There's a separate one for ECG, separate one for non-invasive blood pressure, invasive blood pressure, and so forth. There's one for defibrillators, one for electrosurgery unit generators, electrocautery, separate one for infusion devices, for ventilators, for anesthesia systems, and so on. So underneath this umbrella, you will find the minimum performance and safety standards by medical device category for everything that we need to pretty much worry about. Now let's talk a little bit more specifics about electrical safety testing. So let's talk a little bit about the nature and impact of electric shock. This should be, for most of you, a review, but I just want to go over with you again why we worry about this. The electric shock depends on how much current is flowing through the body, and in fact, that determines also whether you can feel it or whether you cannot. There are thresholds at which, even though the current flow is very high, you cannot feel it anymore. And there are thresholds below which you cannot feel it. So we need to manage all about this electric shock possibility. The path of the current through the body also matters. If it is direct path to the heart, it is much more risky than if it is from arm to arm, because the body's anatomical design kind of shunts some of the current around the heart and doesn't let it actually pass through the heart. So it's the way that we're built, that we're made. And it also matters how long is the human body in the electrical circuit. How long is this current flowing through the body? So typically, macro shock is a shock you can feel, but certainly a shock above the microshock threshold. Microshock is current flow below which, at a current below which you cannot feel, but it's flowing anyway. And that's why we make the measurements. I don't have time to talk about it today, but there is a story from the United States about why and when we began to make electrical safety measurements and testing. It's a very interesting story. You can also hear that story in some of the webinars that are archived by Fluke Biomedical. All right, safety is the key for all electromedical devices for sure. Hospital beds, surrounding environment, leakage tests for ECG, transesophageal echocardiographic probes, because those transducers image from right behind the heart, that in the esophagus outward, and the voltage available, the electromotive force available behind the face of the transducer is 400 to 800 volts. Certainly more than enough, even with a small resistance, to provide current flow that would overwhelm the heart's own pacemaker activity and drive the heart into fibrillation. So these are really important things. Your hospital biomed department may not do hospital beds, electrical beds, but someone is doing it. You may not do surgical tables, but somebody is doing it. And it's the responsibility of the biomed department to make sure that those records are kept. All right. The places where electrical safety testing for sure is done is during design and validation testing, type testing, That is at the medical device manufacturer's location. Acceptance testing is done in the hospital or the clinical client site by us. And also we do the routine testing. The manufacturer's field service engineers will also do routine testing under contract. And we need to also repeat this testing anytime we have done the repair, opened up the medical device at all, broken the isolation barriers. We need to repeat the electrical safety testing and measurements and document them to make sure that we have returned this medical device to safe and effective use. All right, so who should use IEC 60601-1 electrical safety? This is focused primarily on the medical device manufacturer. It's their responsibility to verify safe and effective, that the device is safe and effective from an electrical safety point of view during device design and validation. The tests are not routinely repeated. By the way, they also need to be done in the factory at the end of the production line or in the production cell just before this medical device gets shipped to its end user location. So design, validation, and type testing, final assembly testing in the factory, and then on incoming inspection, we may choose to use IEC 60601-1, or we may be directed and required by the manufacturer to use IEC 60601-1 as opposed to any other standard for the purpose of that acceptance test. And the reason that they would do that is because it allows them to track the testing results measurement by measurement, parameter by parameter, the way that it left the factory. So they want to make sure it arrived at your site with the same quality that it was shipped from their location. I'm not going to go over this one a lot. This one gives you for different medical device patient applied part types. Type B would be a grounded applied part type, patient connection type. BF would be body float, meaning it's isolated, but it is a body isolation. And the most stringent is the type CF or cardiac float, isolated for those kinds of medical devices where the applied part is going to be actually the heart itself or near to the heart itself. So the testing limits that are shown here for both DC leakage current and AC leakage current are, you can see, tighter as we go from B to BF to CF. All right, and that's mainly what I want to show on this slide. You can go into more detail by obtaining a copy of the standards yourself and to familiarize yourself. All right, there are some terminology changes from the second to the third edition of the IEC 60601-1. And in particular, the one I want to focus on is the one that says enclosure leakage. That has been changed in the third edition to be named touch current. And the reason it's touch current is because that's actually what our concern is here. And that would be what happens if the patient somehow touches the medical device while they are connected to it, or the clinician touches the medical device while they are touching the patient. There is a risk of microshock there. We want to be sure that we have measured it and understand how much, where is it flowing, and we need to understand that it's touch current. It's a very interesting demonstration that you can do yourself if you want to. And that would be to take a medical device and make the measurement. So this measurement needs to be made to a non-grounded conductive test point on the touchable surface of the medical device. So that means that if you want to do this experiment, you would put your, you would connect the medical device to your test electrical safety analyzer, and you would touch the medical device and hold the test probe of your electrical safety analyzer, and you will see that current is flowing there. It's actually flowing. If you have a partner, you could touch the medical device, touch them, or them touch you, and they hold the test probe, and you will see the current is actually flowing here. Just a proof point. I've used it for people who are not familiar, like we are, with medical devices and safety. But it's an interesting thing just as a demonstration. Okay. All right, so who should use the other electrical safety standard under IEC 60601? And this is the IEC 62353. It's used in working locations outside the medical device manufacturer. So medical device field service engineers should be using this test method, this test standard, and we as hospital biomeds should be using it. Even if we are using IEC 60601-1 for our acceptance testing or incoming inspection. The IEC 62353 is less complex, fewer testing test steps, and it is meant to be used for ongoing, repeated year after year electrical safety testing of the medical device. Because truth be known, some of the tests in the IEC 60601-1 may tend to shorten the useful life of the medical device. And that is why the IEC 62353 was created to begin with. You may have been familiar with the 751 standard that was applicable mostly in Austria. It is the origin of the 62353, but the 62353 is the current standard. Okay, I talked about touch current, but I want to cover here, what if there is no non-grounded conductive test point on the medical device? Now remember, this cannot be the protective earth test point. You must have your test probe properly on the proper measurement location. So, and this test must be done no matter what. We have to run this test, even if there's no ground. So class, there is a new situation that we face out here now with medical devices that are completely enclosed in plastic. There is no conductive test point available. And by the way, there is no protective earth test point either. And there will not be any in any case under a class 2, which is double insulated. You will only have 2 prongs on the power cord, or a class IP, meaning internal power, like a battery powered medical device. So the standards committee's instructions to us are, in these situations, we will use aluminum foil. And typically you use the aluminum foil that you can obtain in to wrap your sandwich usually with. You need 2 or 3 thicknesses wrapped together around the edges. And then what you will do is put this in close physical contact with the touchable surfaces of the medical device and tape it down with some kind of tape so that it doesn't shift. And connect your test probe to the aluminum foil. Now what we're doing here is we are measuring a capacitively coupled current flow. And that's what's happening for this touch current. Even if the clinician is the pathway for current flow, we have current flowing inside the medical device. We have a plastic enclosure, which is an insulator, and the clinician or the patient are conductor. So we have conductor, insulator, conductor, that's a capacitor. And it will act like a capacitor, and it will produce current flow on the outside conductor, and that we need to measure and minimize. Okay, here's some of the comparative tests between the IEC 62353 and the IEC 60601-1 3rd edition. The two tests that could tend to shorten the useful life of the medical device are the protective earth resistance test. That is a 25 ampere application test, and also the mains on applied part or isolation test, and that is done at 110% of mains. Those two tests may tend to shorten the useful life of the medical device, which is why for repeated testing, we are instructed to use the IEC 62353. The IEC 62353 uses three different testing methodologies. The direct method, which is the one most correlated, able to be correlated to the IEC 60601-1. And for that reason, a quality manager at a medical device manufacturer may want the field service engineers to use the IEC 62353 direct method as the way that they do the testing, except when there is a different method that would actually be required under the standard. So what might that be? Well, in particular, the time when you would use something other than direct or differential methods would be if there is no on-off switch or there are active circuits in the medical device. And so no on-off switch can apply to some kinds of electromedical devices that are used in physical therapy, where as soon as you plug it into the wall, it is on, it is turned on. So current is going to flow in a greater amount than if it was not turned on. So in that case, you would use the alternative method. And that is the clearest example that I can come up with to make it simple for you to understand. This decision tree or flow chart appears in the IEC 62353 standard as the way that you will choose the testing method. And when will you choose that testing method? When you are doing your acceptance testing, incoming inspection, when the medical device is new to your facility, even if you have other brands and models of that medical device also in your inventory already, you still will need to come up with which testing method you will apply. And then that needs to be spelled out in the testing procedure and the policy about how you will do electrical safety testing and when. All right, there's another standard that's out there that I often is confusing to everybody internationally, and that is the IEC 61010. Well, the IEC 61010 is really not just about medical devices. It is an international safety standard applied to all kinds of things, including our test equipment that we use. It has been adopted by the pathologists who control what are the requirements for clinical laboratory equipment. And the 61010 has only two tests that are unique for this application about those analyzers and analyzing systems used in the clinical laboratory. They are the accessible voltage test, and this is an if-then-else logic. So if the accessible voltage test is performed and it passes, no additional tests are required for 61010. This is done by the manufacturer at their location. Sometimes it may be done by an installer, whoever's installing that big clinical laboratory equipment, but it needs to be included, the results of this need to be included in the handoff test report that we get before we go live with this equipment in our location. All right, so if it did not pass the accessible voltage test, then we must perform the accessible leakage current test. If it passes that test, then again, no further tests. we have the measurements we need, we can put it into clinical use. But if it fails also this test, then it's failed and we have to do a corrective action and then repeat the tests definitely before go live, and certainly before that equipment ships from the medical device, sorry, from the manufacturer of that clinical laboratory equipment. After installation, after go live, then we as biomedical engineers and field service engineers are advised by the IEC committees to use the IEC 62353 standard and it's whatever the appropriate test method may be for that. Okay, so for us and what we're going to do as biomedical engineers, 62353 after go live, but the manufacturer is responsible for using 61010 and these two particular tests and document the results for us before we go live. All right, a couple more questions and we're almost finished here. Can a digital multimeter be used to determine medical equipment electrical safety? And the answer to that is not without the IEC specified test load. So you would have to improvise that test load if you're going to use a digital multimeter. And our advice, my advice in my previous job is working with Fluke Biomedical and metrology and medical equipment quality assurance is don't do that. There are many manufacturers of specifically of electrical safety analyzers specifically designed for the purpose of doing electromedical testing. And so you should use one of those. And the medical electrical safety analyzer manufacturer will provide you with the proper way of doing the testing and will incorporate the proper test load into their design. Next question, must the battery-powered medical equipment be tested for electrical safety? And the answer to that is yes. Even though the expected leakage current will be very small, still we need to know how much is there. Because even that small amount of current flow, if applied directly to the heart, is enough to overwhelm the heart's own pacemaker and interrupt the heart's beat. So we'll throw the heart into fibrillation anyway. It really is important for us to do that test. What about three-phase power supplies? So these are all the big iron things like imaging equipment, but also might be kidney dialysis systems that are powered by three-phase. Well, one of the things we need to remember about three-phase power is each phase coming from the power supply has its own reference voltage. They do not share a single reference point. They are the secondary of each of the phase transformers, and they power different parts of a larger system, like an X-ray room, a radiographic room, or a rad fluoro room. Different phases will supply different parts of that whole room, the entire system. So the reference point is certainly not protective earth, really not, but it is not protective earth. And so this is subject needs training pretty much all on its own. So it's all I'm going to be able to say about that right now, but just so you understand what about three-phase. Okay, if you have questions, and we probably should have talked about this earlier on, you should have typed those into the Q&A or into a chat, and one of us, either at GCEA or myself, will be happy to respond to your questions once we receive them. So once again, I really thank you very much for taking the time to be part of this webinar. I hope I have provided some insights and information to you, or caused you to think about some things and remember some things you knew but you didn't really think about recently. These are all important. They are fundamentals. They're certainly not exhaustive to all our jobs and responsibilities, but they certainly give us the foundational things. So once again, thank you very much.